If you are listening to this episode live, well, you know today is Valentine's Day, which means it's our biggest sale of the year for our late night masterclass. This year, we have created a package including group coaching. This is 4 weeks of group coaching with Dr. Glenn and Phyllis, where they are diving deeper into the content and helping you apply it to your life. You also will get a 20-minute lightning session with Dr. Glenn, where he will answer your big question that has you stumped in your relationship. This deal is all being packaged at 75% off. You want to act fast because it is expiring at midnight tonight. The link is in our show notes, and I hope to see you in the group. On today's episode, we have the one and only Wes Wages joining us. I am so glad he's not this elusive name that I bring up. He's a real human, and I'm glad he's here. We are going to be diving into a topic that has affected our home for years and has been a source of pain in Wes's life and in our relationship for a long time, and that is physical touch. We're going to be talking about the importance of physical touch, what physical touch adds to your relationship, what it can do, and just the power that it holds. Welcome to the Connection Codes podcast. This is the podcast where we break open our emotions that take us from being disconnected to connected in our relationships and in ourselves. I am your host, Tara Wages, and joining me is marriage and family therapist, clinical sexologist, Dr. Glenn Hill, and his incredible wife, Phyllis, who together they founded the Connection Codes, which is the guide to human connection. And we're so glad you're here.
Hello, world.
Hi, friends.
Yeah, it's always fun having Wes here. I was just telling him a few minutes ago, we're glad that he's a functional human being and he's not too weird.
Me too.
He's fun to be with.
Yeah, because I have to hang out with me all the time, so we're kind of a package deal.
We love it. So thank you, Wes.
Yeah. Since I feel like when this podcast started, I was on there a few times, helping you guys get set up. I was there for a lot of it.
Yeah.
Well, then now you guys are just running this thing.
I set it up every week by myself, which is a huge deal. And I've had
Feels like homecoming here.
Yeah. it is.
Family reunion.
Family reunion. And I'm glad that you're on here too, because I talk about our relationship on this podcast a lot. And so,
You always tell me after the fact, hey, just so you know, I did say this. Is that okay before I hit publish?
Before I hit publish. But I have fear that our listeners think like, oh man, she's just throwing everything out there for the world and he's not a part of it. So I just wanted people to know, like, we are a team. Wes supports us sharing our life so other people can learn and grow.
Yeah.
So Wes?
I have a little fear because I'm not really sure.
Yes,
I listen to most of them, but so.
Well, and that's part of our goal. That's part of the essence of the Connection Codes is that we're able to be authentic, and my dream is that 10 years from now, that Wes and Tira don't stand out as authentic people.
Yeah.
And right now in our culture, when somebody's authentic, and I sit with, of course, clients all the time who are like, well, I'm going to share something vulnerably here. And they feel like they have to announce it. I'm thinking, well, what if we just lived that way?
Amen.
And you don't have to go to share with total strangers at Walmart, but my goodness, people often, I think the vast majority of people do feel like, okay, even have phrases, well, to tell you the truth about this, I'm like, versus what?
Yeah, totally.
But we operate in we don't do it on purpose, but there's so much pain and fear and unsafety in our relationships that we don't share authentically very much.
Right. But in our case, in this today, we literally will be sharing vulnerably with total strangers in Walmart.
Well, there is that.
If you are listening to this podcast
Get
right
out of
now,
Walmart.
no, and you are
sit in
in
your car.
Walmart, I want you to send me an email.
Wow, that's good.
Because we are willing to share with total strangers in Walmart.
That's good.
Okay, so this topic of physical touch came up from a session that y'all had recently with a client, a couple, and the husband was saying he was desperate for physical touch. And that's all that Phyllis really shared with me about the session. I don't typically know anything that goes on in sessions unless it's something that we can bring into the podcast as a topic. Yeah. And as soon as you said, hey, we should do a podcast on physical touch, we talked to someone who was experiencing this like need for it. It's like, whoa, that has been a huge conversation in our house.
Yeah.
Point of pain. I can actually remember early on in our marriage, we did the love languages test like many couples do.
Yeah.
And Wes scored the highest one was physical touch, and everything else was pretty much a 1,
Just physical touch.
just physical
Times
touch. And I scored high in everything else, but scored a 1 in physical touch. And for a long time, the joke was that 1 is reserved for a massage therapist. That's the only one I want touching me
Sad.
in that 1. I know, so sad. I validate that. I'm so sorry. And I can remember us laying in bed after we took that test, and our calves were like touching each other, just our calves. And he would say, "Do you feel like this is physical touch right now?" I was like, "Yeah, dog. I'm literally touching you with my leg right now. This is physical touch." And from that moment, we essentially had to do lessons. Wes had to teach me what physical touch, how he received it, how he felt it, how he wanted to feel it. Do you remember this?
Oh, yeah.
And it was a long process that had highs and lows, because then I went through the season of having babies that are touching me all day, every day.
Yeah.
And I'm like, and now you're home and you want me to touch you too? And so it was really difficult. So Wes, I want you to share your perspective.
Yeah. I mean, look at you right now.
I'm touching you the whole time. Lynn and Phyllis do such a good job touching each other
real.
all the time when they're talking. So they're rubbing off on me.
You guys do a great job.
Literally
Wait,
rubbing
did you
off
get
on
that
me.
Rubbing off.
See, that Tara, she is just funny.
She is.
I'm trying.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, like, I'm assuming I was born with the natural need of physical touch. Maybe there's some trauma there that we could unpack at a later session. But I don't think I think it was just natural to go into our marriage thinking, oh, of course my wife is going to touch me and have that. You know what I mean?
Right.
And then we get in and it's like, bro, you don't even know really what it is. And we don't know how each other desire that and need that, and same with me with words of affirmation. I know this is on physical touch, but like I was never good at giving words of affirmation, nor did I even know really what that was.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, we're still learning all of that.
Yeah.
15 years in. But I do remember like seeing people at church, and you would see the wife like put their arm around the husband in front of you, because like you're just watching the people's back of the heads. And I'd be like, oh my gosh, I desire that so much,
Yeah.
but it's just not built into you.
Yeah.
So I remember telling you like, oh, if you would just put my arm, I felt so much shame in that, like asking you to do that. Cause I was like, part of me feels like, and we could get into this. I mean, even last week I had this. Part of me feels like when I ask you to do it, I'm like forcing it on you, but you really don't feel that way.
Oh no.
You know? I think that's a really hard thing.
Yeah.
Because we'll just jump straight in. You ready for this? The vulnerability.
I'm ready.
Last week we had a great day on Saturday. We woke up, the kids were away, and we actually spent all day just going and looking at jewelry, which we just haven't had time to do that in a while. And
Wes is wanting to treat me.
Wanting a treat. So we did that all day, just spent time with each other, grabbed coffee. And of course, every day I'm doing the math in my head. Well, how does this equal sex today? It's just every single day. And so that day I was like, oh man, this is going to be great, because we've connected the way a woman wants to connect. We're like emotionally looking at jewelry and rings and everything.
That's not emotionally, but yes.
Well, you know what I mean? Like
we spent the day together. It was a great day.
And then, the day unfolds and we go to dinner. Did we go to dinner with people?
Haley and Nathan. Yeah.
Oh yeah. And then so afterwards, we go back home, and sex lasted like 2 minutes. You know what I mean? And I was expecting this 3-hour session.
And that wasn't because anything on Wes's fault, just to be clear.
No. No, well, I mean, 2 minutes here, that's pretty good. But just
I was rushing the process.
Tira was rushing the process
Unintentionally.
But I was expecting this great physical touch moment where we could finally connect and building up the entire day. And then it lasted 2 minutes and like, okay, done. And I was like, oh my gosh, I felt like I felt so much shame in the moment because I wanted to sit there and ask you like that. I need way more than that. But in my head, I'm thinking like, oh my gosh, like she's not attracted to me. She doesn't want to have sex with me. She doesn't even want to do physical touch with me. And it goes so deep, you know what I mean? And so it just took so much for me to like work myself through that. And I will say prior to connection codes, oh man, that would have been probably weeks of a disconnect.
So bad.
You know, now I can say, well, honestly, Tira noticed by my nonverbal communications that something was up. She's like, what's happening with you?
Way to go, T.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And so we worked through that. And also that when she stands up and says that, I have to reciprocate, right? And I have to acknowledge the fact that she's asking you, and I have to say, oh, I'm feeling a lot of sadness and shame.
Well, we ended up doing the will.
Yeah.
And you started that. We were laying in bed, lights were off. And I do want to point out one thing about the story is that you actually didn't desire sex that night. You were desiring the touch before sex. You were desiring that, like, us just being together, not the sexual, exchange, for lack of a better word.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that's where the miss was, and that's where the physical touch comes in, because physical touch is not always sexual. And that's something that I really want to point out, because I think that's where women, we tend to be like, ooh, I don't want to do a physical touch, because then we think there's something sexual always attached to it. But that is what you were needing that specific night, which I do want to go back to earlier in our relationship too. But yeah, we were laying in the bed later, and it was dark, and you just started with anger and worked your way around the will. And then I followed. And truly, we connected very quickly, because by doing the will, Wes remembered what was happening for me that day that he had forgotten. He remembered why I may want to rush it at night, and why I was not feeling like spending an hour, having sex. And so we truly connected because we were able to both see each other wholly in a way that we had not 5 minutes earlier.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a great example. I do want to hear though, like early in our relationship, think back to whenever I had kids, and even just like hugs and touching you, holding your hand, coming up and hugging you, how you feel whenever you're not experiencing that. What happens for you?
I mean, there's just deep desire of intimacy. You know what I mean? And I'm not saying like intimacy as in like a sexual way, just like that's what makes me feel loved. Do you know? It's just the hug or the shoulder, you know what I mean? Or just like spending that one moment hugging without feeling like you have to go do something else. I will say, like earlier in our relationship, I mean, like as you're walking out the door, you would give me a quick hug and then, okay, see ya. And I would just felt that even like took me deeper of like, oh my gosh, like she doesn't care for me, you know? And so it's just communicating, right? And saying, when you just do a side hug and walk out the door, like that hurts me so much inside.
Yeah.
And now our next guest on the show is entering the room. Oh, hi, Milo.
Hey, Milo.
Oh, yeah, we have a kid at home today who's sick.
Texting people.
So I think that is so important to think about, because I had no idea that that's how physical touch was affecting him. And I think that it was more than just touching. It was like, hey, I see you. So in the same way for me, when he would tell me like words of affirmation and like, you did a great job at this, or listen to my emotions or concerns, we women feel unseen when we don't feel like we can like talk to our husband about our emotions. And when it's a physical touch situation, you felt unseen because I wasn't reaching my hand out and just grabbing you. And there've been a lot of times in conflict where you have been upset with me pre-connection codes, and a week later, whenever we're still working it out, you're like, T, if you would have just turned around and hugged me, like, you know what I need, and I just want you to touch me in those moments. Yeah. So Glenn, I want to hear from you and both of y'all, because there's like science behind this.
Absolutely.
There's like proof that reaching your hand out, like Phyllis, when you touch my hands, I'm like, oh my gosh, I actually understand what Wes feels when Phyllis or my mom, or I think I feel it more when a woman touches me because that's so rare. I have a friend, Lindsay, who like, she's so good to touch me and I just feel so seen and so loved. Yeah. So let's talk about.
Phyllis uses both hands. I've always noticed that about you.
Yeah.
I feel like you always say, how are you doing using both hands? And oh my gosh, I'm just, whenever I feel that or see it, I'm just like, that's so much love right there.
That's so cool. Well, it's interesting. Before Glenn gives the science, I think about, for me, just thinking back to when we first got married, I didn't have any concept around physical touch.
Right.
And, and I think, wow, I never saw my parents hold hands. I never saw them hug. I never saw them, touch in any way. And so I think, well, yeah, I'm not sure that I just had any teaching on that. And then even for myself, I don't know that I have no memory of, being hugged as a child or sitting on my parents' lap or being cuddled or snuggled or, like there was, to me, all my memories are that things were very rigid. There was a lot of order in our home. And so even bedtime, I don't have any memories of a parent laying down with me and reading to me or something like that. It was just very clear memory of, I can picture my bedroom or my bed or whatever, but I don't have any memories of that. And so you kind of think, okay, then you bring this into marriage and it's almost like a deficit. And maybe there is a difference too, that I have a different level of need when it comes to physical touch. But I think I came into marriage just with a deficit, as in what? I didn't know humans are supposed to touch. Like, I didn't know there was something about like power in that, or like that could actually heal parts of your body. Like, I don't think I knew any of that.
Well, yeah. And I remember when we were dating, the bumper sticker came out that said, "Have you hugged your kid today?" And I can remember you telling me about basically teaching your parents, training your parents to hug you. Wow. Which, I was just a loony teenager myself, so it didn't mean anything to me. But thinking back, I'm like, that's amazing that this young woman actually taught her parents how to touch and how to touch her, which is what you needed from birth. And of course, we do have lots of research, some horrific research, about what happens to a baby that's not touched. And that's been replicated numerous times, or at least documented numerous times, because we don't really set those up on purpose typically. But it's so incredibly damaging to babies when they're not touched. They can have all the nutrition, have the clothing, have the shelter that they need, but if they don't have physical touch. So we're just coded for that from birth. And somewhere along the way, we get knocked off course. And, there's a spectrum. So, each human is unique. But the love languages were huge for us many years ago, learning that. But as I've studied it more, I realized, wait, the 5 love languages are true for everybody. And if they're not true, then something funky's happening here. I mean, for example, for me, words of affirmation are very difficult. I feel really weird. I get flooded with shame when people give me words of affirmation. Well, that's because something's knocked off course. That's because something's whacked out. It's not because, my DNA, I was genetically not coded to like words of affirmation. No, that's because things got weird for me. And to this day, I'm 61 years old, and to this day it feels weird. I can hear it now, but I still get hit with shame. It's like, it's just uncomfortable for people to give me words of affirmation. But that's not because I was born that way. It's because I became that way through a lot of, we always say events, circumstances, interactions, people, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know one of our connection codes protocol, whenever you're in conflict, is to actually reach out and touch someone. And so why is that?
Well, Tira, with the connection codes, we don't ask why, because so much of the time we
But with science, I'm allowed to ask why. You do say that.
Yeah, you're right. But so much of it we can't figure out why. I mean, why do we have long hair grows on our head and it doesn't grow that long on our legs? Well, heck if I know. I mean, I don't know if that's a God question or evolution question, but that's just how humans function. Wouldn't that be funny if your legs grew that much hair?
So it doesn't grow as long as on your legs?
Wouldn't that, well, do you have hair that long?
That's a good point. No.
Yeah, your underarm hair is, like a foot and a half long. If you're like,
Wow.
that would be different. Yeah. So again, why is that? Well, some of it we can figure out, some of it we can't. But what we do know, and this probably the last 20 years, we've been able to examine cells when they're touched. If I reach out and touch Phyllis's shoulder, it actually makes this, as long as she's not afraid of me, it makes the cells in that area of her body more permeable to water. And, our bodies are primarily water. And so we have to have that. And if her cells had emojis on them, it'd be a little smiley face. And she's like, oh, well, so somebody just touched me. And I think what an incredibly cheap prescription. It doesn't cost you anything just to touch. But the problem is, and we cover this, in the Connection Codes book, and I think in the masterclass too, if we're not connected, I don't feel like touching her, and she doesn't feel like being touched by me. And then if we never touch, well, then we're connected less, and it just becomes this downward spiral. But we do know that the cells are simply, quote unquote, happier whenever we're getting regular physical touch. And again, that's even if you're not comfortable. And of course, kids that have been through intense trauma, and adults too, what we call RAD, reactive adjustment disorder, where you reach to touch them and what they're experiencing is a threat. And I've sat with lots of families that, have a child that deals with RAD. And so this mom, especially perhaps in an adoptive scenario, this dad are thinking, oh, I'm going to love this little one, this 3-year-old, this 5-year-old, this 8-year-old, whatever. And so they're just going to hug the little kid because that's a good and right thing. And this kid freaks out. And of course, then the parent is just like, what did I do wrong? Well, you didn't do anything wrong. It's what happened before, right? Perhaps even years before. That's the problem. And I went through many years of my childhood with basically no physical touch at all. I just didn't have the people in my life. And I'm not mad at anybody. It's just the way my life played out. That just happened. And so that became a really weird thing for me when someone would go to touch me. Even shaking hands, I just didn't feel comfortable doing that. So, again, we can't necessarily answer exactly the reason humans are that way, but we do know that we are. That's just what happens.
Right. Yeah. I wanted to know why that's even one of our protocols. And that is because there is research that when you are emotionally connected and you reach out and you touch your partner, I mean, to know that Wes's cells are like emoji smiling underneath my hand.
Yeah, right there.
Oh my gosh. I want to touch him all. I want his whole body to be emoji smileys all the time.
Well, then you have to touch his whole body. There you go.
Yeah. Well, we'll get smileys all over.
Some of the rest of the signs of that is, again, as long as the person doesn't perceive you as a threat, when you touch them, it produces oxytocin in the brain. And oxytocin is a pain and fear stabilizer. And so now they experience less pain. And it's phenomenal. It's a great book, Swimming in the Sink, the story of Lynn Cox. Some great information in that. It's a small book. It's real easy to read. But they just began experimenting on her because she was able to do some stuff that didn't make any sense. And trying to figure out how does this woman do these remarkable things. And part of that was because of her deep connections with her family. I say part of it, maybe the vast majority or all of it. So just the experiments show that the physical touch just changes us biochemically, changes what's happening, the neurotransmitters, changes what's happening in the brain. And then which is also very much emotion connected. And emotions are what drive the body. And you'll watch your kids, if they're not, especially the little ones, if they're not touched adequately, we don't know what adequately is. There's no, set equation. If they're not touched adequately, they get in a foul mood. And then you're looking at them like, why are they misbehaving? Why are they being so difficult? And to figure out, well, what is? And that's a great question. Why are they? Let's go backwards. Like, oh, okay, I've been really busy. I'm not blaming the parents. I'm not saying they're evil. Life comes at you fast. Yeah. And they have not had taken the time to go, oh, this one just needs to be. And you watch the little ones, they just walk in and they're just like, hold me.
Oh, yeah.
Why? Well, why do I need to hold you? There's no reason. Well, it's just a human condition. And this 2-year-old right this minute, right this second, needs to be held.
Yeah.
And it's amazing the effect that has on us.
I love all of what we've learned in the last few years. and with connection codes, just how much is brought back to the child. As far as emotion, I mean, the physical touch and connection, but also one thing that's been dramatically different in our house is the fact that like our kids are going to get louder and louder and louder until they don't.
Yeah.
I mean, that's, kids are going to naturally scream because they're trying to get your attention until you ignore them enough to where.
And then we discipline that screaming. We discipline that behavior.
Yes.
Right.
It's like, wait, and I'm not saying the behavior is easy. I mean, a screaming child is difficult, but to find out, well, what's pushing that behavior? What's before that behavior? Because if you shut, and that's exactly what happened in my home. And again, I'm not mad at my parents, but it was just constant monitoring the symptoms.
Yeah.
And I don't remember ever, I literally don't, I can't have, and Phyllis and I have been going through what's called the Yellow Book, and I have zero memory of ever being touched affectionately. I remember lots of discipline scenarios. I don't remember one time ever, and I'm not saying it didn't happen, I just don't remember it. I literally have zero memory of just being held, cuddled, just embraced. I have zero, and that was startling to me just the last few days as we've talked about that. I'm like, wait, hold on, give me a second. I'll think of like 3. I can't think of a 1.
Yeah.
And that's stunning to me to think this little guy, and again, I'm not saying it didn't happen. I just don't remember it at all. There's zero memory of anything connected to that in any way. Like, wow, no wonder I'm so whacked out.
Yeah.
I grew up in an environment where that just wasn't a thing. And of course, Phyllis did too. And then you put these 2 individuals together and it's like, ooh, they may have a few struggles here, which we did.
Right.
I think, and so, early in our marriage, I would approach Tyra physically, even sexually, and get denied. And literally, I think it kind of set, maybe is precedent the word, where like I had then a lot of fear to approach you sexually because I had gotten denied so much, but you just didn't see kind of what was going on,
Yeah.
nor did I have the words to tell you what was going on.
Right.
And that still affects today.
Right. But even more than that, you were even just approaching me for a hug and getting denied.
Yeah.
So just even the baseline of physical touch for you
Right.
was a negative experience. And now, because one of the things I do love about the connection codes is we always look at what kids do. And we have a son who is Wes's mini me in so many ways. And he has, as a baby, I think if he could have crawled back in my stomach, he would have done it. I would hold him and his hand would be down inside my shirt, touching my belly button at all times. And he would be in my lap just saying, hold me, mama, hold me. And I'm like, I am holding you right now. And to this day, and he's not a little one anymore, to this day, when it's nighttime, I mean, he is on top of me, we just lay in his bed for a long time, touching. And now to see how desperate, where we as adults, our kids are doing on the outside what we are feeling on the inside.
Wow. That's good.
And so to see what he is doing on the outside, so just like desperate to be touched and to be held and to be loved, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's what's been happening to Wes's insides for the first 12 years of our marriage. I mean, it's gotten better, aside from Saturday night, though I had my reasons. But for the first 12 years of our marriage, he was just wanting to just say, like, hold me, hold me, hold me. And I was unable to slow myself down. I was able to. I chose not to slow myself down and tune in to the importance of that. I didn't know there were emojis lighting up in his skin when I did that.
Yeah.
It would have changed everything.
Yeah. And I feel some fear presenting this because I don't want it to sound too either flippant and I don't want it to sound, what would I call that? I don't want anybody to feel stuck by this because every human is unique, every situation is unique, every relationship is unique. But what's amazing is how fast it can actually happen. So in other words, if Tyra turns, embraces this guy wholeheartedly, hugs him, just holds him, looks him in the eye and goes, oh my gosh, you're so valuable to me. I just adore you. If we timed it, I don't know, we're probably talking 20 seconds. we're probably talking 30 seconds.
Yes.
And what's sad, and I get it, how life comes at you fast and plays out. Instead, that doesn't happen, and now they're at odds for 3 hours or 3 days or 3 weeks, which was certainly our story so many times. And now, of course, we realize that, oh my goodness, let's just slow down for 20. I'm not talking about a 45-second hug here. I mean, a 45-minute hug. Literally 20 seconds, 30 seconds, we just changed the world. We changed the world for these two. And this is one of the reasons one of our protocols is slower is faster. If we slow down and do that thing, and you see it with your kids, and we're around you a lot. We just love seeing your kids. And if you're not there for them, if they don't feel seen, they don't feel heard, now it's going to take you an hour to deal with this. And if they feel seen and heard in 20 seconds, you do the math. I don't know what that math equation is, but 20 seconds versus an hour.
Right.
And it's amazing the difference. And it's tough to do, especially for parents with young kids. Again, there's a lot coming at you, but it actually works just to slow down, be present with them in the moment.
Well, and I want to point out with that, because you said that if you'll slow down for those 20 seconds, then you won't have a fight for an hour. Often what happens, especially when we're talking about things like this, that fight that you may have in an hour, you're not even going to know it's related.
Yes. Ooh,
it's going to be over something completely logistical, like you didn't meet me when you said you were going to meet me, and now we're spiraling over the not meeting, when in reality, your partner who's craving physical touch, their brain hasn't been hit with oxytocin. Like, it is out of balance. It's desperate for something, but they don't even know how to communicate that. Or if they do know how, they're so fearful of being rejected that now you're just fighting over logistics all the time and in a constant spiral about something not even related to the root cause.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Wes, going back to, and if I heard you right, it was Saturday. So what happens for you in that moment that blocks you from just telling this girl what's happening for you in the moment, exactly as it's happening?
Like during sex?
Sure.
Or after?
Before.
Immediately it was just this like, oh, she doesn't desire me or want me or anything, all the above.
We're looking for one of 8 words. Which one would that one be?
Right. Oh, I felt so much shame.
Wow.
There was fear, probably a little anger, and sad. Yeah, those are probably the 4. Lonely.
I was about to say, you're missing.
I mean,
lonely.
basically, honestly, like so many emotions in such a short amount of time, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I would suggest that there's even joy in the craving of the joy in the, I would feel so much joy if it didn't happen. So that makes it even worse.
Yeah.
Because the joy expectation is there and then it doesn't happen. So
did you communicate your need ahead of time, or did you miss on that?
Right. And that's what
wasn't it obvious, Phyllis? I mean, we had this whole day. It was just us, and like we were feeling all the emotions and like in love. And
then we stayed out till 12:30 with our friends, which I'm so glad if y'all are listening to this episode.
Time never gets in the way of physical touch with me, though.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But it is true, and we're laughing a little, but that's our goal. That's our mission with the Connection Coach, is to get every human on the planet. Because here's the thing I remember about Wes. When he was 12 months old, he never hesitated to let anybody know. Yeah. We never sat around and wondered, what's happening with Wes? We can't tell. We always knew, even if it was 3 o'clock in the morning. I'm not saying wake tear up at 3 o'clock in the morning.
Please don't.
But 3 a.m. when Wes was 12, 15, 18 months old, 3 o'clock in the morning, something happened with him. He conveyed it. He communicated it automatically. And I get it. We're grown-ups. We have some parameters, but not nearly as many as we think we do. And if we can get everybody on the planet, which includes Wes, just to convey authentically, just tell the girl what's happening with you. Will she respond perfectly? Probably not. I haven't met a lot of perfect people. I'm married to one. But okay, not really. No. She'll miss with it, but she will be exponentially closer to being present with you if you just tell the girl what's happening.
I do remember during the day we were driving on the interstate, and I remember telling her like, "Oh, I have so much joy thinking about you and me tonight."
Wow,
I did say
Good
that
for you. That's amazing.
But I do want to say, Tyra wasn't feeling well that day. And all of my excitement and joy completely erased anything that she was feeling. And until that night, she was like, remember this. And I was like, oh yeah. Now I have so much guilt, you know? So I did, but also I think there are other factors that have to play, right?
Right. Well, and in my perspective, I fulfilled that. We had sex. We had pretty good sex. I mean, it was short, but yeah, it was not like I wasn't mentally tapped out.
Yeah.
You know, which is how we spent 12 years of our marriage of just like, yeah, I'm a body willing to show up.
And there's so much of that pain for me that it brings me straight back to that, right?
Yeah.
Wow.
When sex is really quick, it brings me straight back to early in our marriage when like you were not there.
Wow.
Right.
Like, you know what I mean? It's like, hey, let's get this done so you can be fine.
Yeah.
And so that's what it brings that up.
Yeah.
I get that.
And I always emphasize to anybody, but especially partner pairs, that we're not talking magic fairy dust here. So it's not like an instant fix or cure or whatever. But if we can get Wes to always convey authentically, we've exponentially increased the odds of Tyra being able to be present with him. And of course, that's vice versa, the same. Even with that, you know, for Tyra to be able to convey real quickly, and I don't even know what all was happening, but just the sadness, which was probably a sad experience. Her body's just sad. She's not trying to feel sad. She just doesn't, may even be a hurt experience, but it's a pain experience. And for her to cue that in, or cue Wes in on that, oh, sad, my body's just not there. It's not functioning right. It's not doing what I would like for it to, which she's not voting for. She's not, you know, signing up for any of that. And that just cues Wes in that, oh, okay, something's happening here for my friend, my teammate. Oh, okay. Again, it may not play out exactly the way you'd like, but we still have a much, much, much greater chance of the two of them connecting through the experience.
Right.
And I will say, I mean, when you say the word, you know, I need to authentically connect all the time, there's a big roadblock for me. I'm like, oh gosh, like that means I have to dig deep and all that. But I think what the core emotion wheel does is it just gives me words to that immediately. So for a lot of men out there, which I know is happening, is that like, if you just don't know where to go or how to say this emotion and feeling, it's pretty easy. There's only 8.
Yep.
And I can just be like, oh, I'm feeling some sad.
Yeah.
You know, well, what's happening there? Well, you just kind of like go down the path. And that's helped a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
well, and I would suggest with hurt, sad, and lonely, you know, they all fire in the pain region of the brain. Just say pain. Oh, I just feel pain.
Yeah.
That cues the other person in. Everybody on the planet knows what pain is. And, you know, you may elaborate on it in the next 2 or 3 sentences, but it cues the other person in so instantly that, whoa, wait, what's happening? What am I missing here? You're experiencing pain. And they just tune in. So anyway, I want to make sure I didn't misconvey because, you know, dude, I just admire you that you have the heart for this. And I think you do it well. You know, we're all just pilgrims on the journey. Phyllis and I miss on stuff just like everybody else does. But I've watched you, and it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
I just want to put that out there because I'm not fussing at you.
Yeah.
I do want to point out, though, with physical touch, because I fear a lot of my fear around physical touch for a long time. And I think a lot, especially if it's the woman who's the husband's wanting it and she has young kids, the non-sexual physical touch is just as important as the sexual physical touch. Wes, is this true?
Yes.
Glenn, is this true?
Well, you shouldn't have asked me. I don't really view it that way. All of my touch with Phyllis is sexual. It's either pre-sex, during sex, or after sex.
No, okay, but from like, yes, I don't want a woman to hesitate or think like, or actually, I've heard this from women. Wes and I had a podcast for a while, and I had somebody message me one time, and they said, my husband only touches me when it's sexual, when he's wanting something sexual.
Yep.
And it was such a source of pain for her
Yep.
that the other touches, the hugs, the holding hands, the wrap arms around, like those are just as vital to your relationship. At like, you can't forget that part.
Right,
Is
but that's
my point.
Right, but that's the problem, is that there's a void there. The problem is not that, oh, he touches me sexually. No, the problem is he doesn't touch me otherwise.
Right.
And my only fear of that, and I forget the name of the book, but there's a book written about this. It was pretty extensive. And my fear in that is what I observed happening with so many couples I sat with is for both of them, especially for the man, now he's hit with fear every day. It's like, oh my gosh, am I about to touch? Is this sexual or non-sexual? I'm not even sure. Am I touching her because she's my one?
Well, if you're touching her boobs and her butt, it's sexual.
Oh, well, I do. I have no idea how many times a day I do that with fellas, but we're not involved sexually that many times in a day.
Right. But if Wes was only coming up and touching my butt or touching my boobs, I'd be like, don't freaking touch me again.
That's because he's missing out on all the other part of it. Yes.
So that's what I think that is where having these, like, for a man to have that fear of, is this sexual or is it not sexual? I feel like it's pretty obvious. Like, are you giving her a hug because you like just want to hug her? Or are you trying to grab her butt?
It's not obvious.
Okay.
I mean, it's just not. And again, I've sat with so many men who are now paranoid because he's like, oh, I want to hold her hand while I'm sitting beside her, but I'm holding her hand because she's my one unique sexual friend. I don't hold another woman's hand on the planet like this. I mean, there literally are no women that I sit around and, I mean, literally just hold her hand. I don't do that with anybody.
Right.
So is that sexual or not? Well, she's unique in my life, so
totally.
sort of.
I would view her as your wife, not just your sexual partner in that moment.
It's all the same, though. So,
I get that.
Probably more so for men. Again, every human's unique, but more so for men. He's not even thinking in terms. I mean, I wouldn't. I mean, Tara, I adore you. We're very close. I wouldn't walk up and start stroking your hair. You would think, what is he doing?
I think for me, the pain is, and I think this is a personal fear. When Wes looks at me, I don't want him to view me as his sexual partner. Like, that is not the term that I would want, like, my title over my head.
Your only title?
Yeah. Like, I wouldn't want him to want to touch me or that's the reason he touches me, because I'm his sexual partner. I would much desire for it to be because I am his partner, sexual, non-sexual, whatever, but like, I'm his life partner. And so to me, it feels very different than him touching me because I'm his sexual partner.
Well, I just can't relate to that.
Yeah.
I probably used to could. I don't know, but I don't now. Maybe that's a whole separate podcast. But
does it matter? Like how?
I think it does to me, because I want to be so much more to you than your sexual partner.
But you are.
Right, but that's for me, because sex still feels pressure.
Oh, well.
Which we have a podcast about. It's a very popular podcast if you've not listened to Sex and Pressure and Sex.
Right.
And so it feels like you are doing it because you are going to get something out of it, or because I'm providing something for you, not because you are loving Tira Wages as your partner. But having that sexual part of it, it feels very different in my brain. I want to be so much more than that for you. And I'm glad that I'm the only one that you get to do that with. And I'm the only person that you hold hands and all of that with. And that is the thing that changed my life, is wanting to have sex with you, is like, I'm your only sexual partner. So I got to step up. Like, I've shared that on the podcast multiple times, but I guess I don't want you to view me that way. I want you to want to hug me because you just want to be with me as Tira.
Yeah.
Not as a sex.
Yeah,
not
I just don't
the sex goddess that I am. You know, not really. That was a joke.
I don't delineate any of that, and I'd love to hear.
It is interesting because I think there's history behind that, and there's pain for you behind that,
Right.
and it is confusing in the sense because earlier it was kind of cute, Wes. You shared that was it 5 seconds? Every 5 seconds you're having.
Just throughout the entire day, I'm doing these addition math problems to say, how does this equal sex?
Yeah.
And yet and it's sex with who?
My one sexual partner, my wife.
Exactly. Right. So it's not like you're having all these thoughts about hundreds of women or all of that. It is all directed at you.
Right.
And I think, my fear is that I get what you're saying. And I think a lot of women feel that that's their only worth or their only value.
Wow.
Right.
which is then another topic of really being able to express, I need to figure this out for myself. And I need, like, even expressing, I need to hear from you that you value me as a mom, as a business partner, as a, as a cook. I mean, whatever the long list could be that you could create, where it would be, I just need to hear words
Right.
that would communicate, you have so much value. But to try to separate, first of all, I don't think for Wes that's humanly possible for him to separate, because he wraps it all up in one.
Right.
So true. Yeah.
And so it's kind of one of those where I think it's really difficult, that even the thought that there's, like, I think that sets people up for almost like really painful scenarios where you almost distinguish, this is physical touch, non-sexual, this is like it just becomes
I don't know how you figure that out.
right.
Oh, see, I can feel it. I can tell when Wes is just hugging me to love me, and when Wes is like trying to fill me up.
But what if he's not?
Making a move on you.
Oh,
Well,
it's very obvious at my house.
Do you, I mean, I don't know. I'd have to ask Wes. But that's just going to be a tough dynamic, because now he's going to deal with a fair amount of paranoia that, okay, what's she receiving in this? Is this sexual? I mean, there's one set of boobs on the planet that I play with, and I love that. That's incredibly valuable and powerful for me. But if I come up behind Phyllis and I squeeze her boobs, it's not like, okay, now we have to have some sort of sexual activity. No, that's just how I touch her.
I think a huge part of it, and I don't know, I have fear in saying this, is that it may have been different if we were having this conversation with y'all when you had 4 little kids at home.
Oh, absolutely.
Nursing on those boobs.
Yep.
Or when you were in an unhealthy sexual state, and that was what you were doing.
Yep.
And so a lot of it for us was in our unhealthy states.
Absolutely.
And so that's what I'm thinking about for listeners that are in an unhealthy sexual state, where now Wes can come up and hit my butt, touch my boobs. I mean, there are a couple of times where I'm like, bud. Not often anymore, though, where previously when we were sexually unhealthy, if he would just walk up and grab my boobs,
Absolutely.
I'd be like,
Yeah.
are you kidding me? Like, this is all you want me for?
Right.
That's how it would feel, much different than him hugging me, or, which for me, physical touch is not what I'm ever looking for. But it would feel super, super different. I think that when he just hugs me, and it's not to turn it sexually or make it sexual, I have identity. Like, I feel seen, that he's just doing this for me, not because he wants to fill me up.
Yeah, but my dream for every partner pair, which includes 2 of you, is that your touch, your physical touch, and not just your physical touch, but your connection is so deep and continuous that you end up not noticing anymore.
And I would say we're at this point now, but I don't think that the majority of people are, and so I'm just really trying to think of where we were a few years ago. And the girl that wrote me in, she's like, how do I get my husband to just stop hitting my butt every time he walks by me? Right. And that's the only way he touches me all day.
Yeah.
And so I can just sense her pain in that.
Yes.
Well, I think what's important in all this, as far as the listeners go, is to realize the connection codes give us tools to communicate.
To change that whole atmosphere.
Yes, to communicate the pain, to communicate the need, to communicate what's happening for each of you. And, even in the phrasing, like, even in being able to say, if the only time your husband touches you is that he walks by and, smacks you on the butt, and for you to be able to go, whoa, I feel pain when you do that. And for him to know that the next words out of his mouth are, ooh, what am I missing? What's happening for you? And for him to tune into that, for him to learn what that communicates, for you. And then he can communicate. You can even say, what happens for you, for him to be able to go, oh, so much joy. There's no other woman on the planet but that I get to touch or it's playful. Whatever is happening for him, it's like then you have this dialogue, but then he also hears your pain in it. Right. And then for him to become aware, oh, okay, so, and for him, it may be part of his journey of his trauma, like, oh, well, I'm not comfortable holding hands. Well, where did that come from? And for you to be able to go, well, I really need you to hold my hand. I need you when we're in the car to reach over and hold my hand, or when we're sitting at a movie, or when we're at dinner, or when we're sitting beside each other, wherever. I just need you to hold my hand.
Right.
And to communicate that need is so human, so important.
Right.
And to have a language, and that's what I love about the connection codes, is there's the language. And we started this whole podcast talking about the couple that came in, and where he wished he didn't have that need. Like he was expressing, like, I feel shame that I have this need, this incredible need for her to touch me. And she's raising, well, they both are, but she's home with young babies, she's pregnant, she's touched out. And for him to realize that, but then for her to also realize he's not wrong in wanting her touch.
Right.
And also he doesn't want to be just another kid that she touches. There was some conversation about that. Like, he doesn't want to be child number whatever.
Right.
Like he really, like, that's a real pain point for him. And yet she's also expressing pain of just being touched out.
Yeah.
And so I think that we go through different seasons in our life,
100%.
and it's so important to have the language to be able to communicate that. And I think that goes back to what was happening with you and Wes on Saturday. You were having a very different experience because of some physical challenges you were having. And so then that's just the season you were in that day, that time right now. Like, so for you to be able to say to him, even expressing that, or even saying, I feel some sadness that I'm not feeling better today, because I know this is so rare that all the kids are gone. They're at grandma's house or whatever.
Yeah.
And, just to acknowledge that you see the need or his desire for you and the physical touch, and like you're having a blast because you're doing the thing that you really enjoy, which I didn't know about you.
I know.
I can't imagine spending a whole day going jewelry shopping.
Well, he's wanting to get me a new ring.
Okay, but I don't think I've ever done that in my life. So
You have beautiful rings. I admire your rings all the time.
yeah, I don't even know how I get those rings. They just come my way or something. I don't know. I've never gone ring shopping. So, I think just knowing, wow, that was special for you. That was fun for you.
Yeah, and I just do want to mention, because that is a very real thing. And I think, as far as I know, men can't really relate to this, maybe at all. But a mom of young children, I mean, they're literally touched, who knows, many, many dozens, if not hundreds of times a day.
Right.
Well, their body doesn't know the difference. And I hear a lot of, young mothers will say, I'm just touched out. Well, the man can't relate to that at all. It's like, what? Whatever. He's been out, he's been at work, and he's been touched once. He shook hands,
Right.
at one point.
Right.
And so he's like, well, what do you mean? And this fellow said he doesn't want to be viewed as another kid. He's like, well, yeah, you've been touched all day by, our 3 children, but you haven't been touched by me. Her body doesn't know the difference. And I would encourage men to be aware of that. And she's not doing that on purpose. She's not trying to be touched out. She's not trying to experience X number of touches as a pain experience, but they are. And that can be from a precious little 3-year-old who's like, I touched mom 130 times today, and then she got tired of being touched. Well, the mom's not trying to feel pain over that. She just does.
Yeah.
Right.
That being said, because I think that's a unique season in life, if you ask Phyllis, how many times has Glenn touched you in the last week? She has no idea. And if she were to try to delineate and say, well, how many of those were sexual and how many were non-sexual, she has no idea. And it's vice versa, but it's probably a little bit more for the female than the male. And I have no idea. I don't know how many times have I touched her the last week. Not a clue. And how many of those were sexual? How many? I don't know how to delineate that, and I don't want to. And my dream, and again, I would just like to emphasize that the problem is the void that's happening with all the rest of the time. If what she's experiencing is that, the only time he touches me is when he wants to have sex, well, I'm not going to be able to say to that guy, well, then you need to stop touching her altogether. Well, that's disastrous. So what we have to do is fix all of the other parts of life. And then Phyllis doesn't even notice, well, let's see, how many times did he touch me sexually this week? She has no idea. I think that's fair. I'm speaking for you, but
yeah, that's good.
Yeah, I do. I appreciate you talking about just like that season of life, because it is important. A season that, Carlos Whitaker came on the podcast recently, and he talked about how you go through this like season and it'll eventually be a chapter and then a book and then a word. And I think the motherhood season will forever be a chapter for people. It's not just big. Like a very short thing. And just depending on how long that lasts for you. So for me, it's been 9 years of, I was either pregnant or nursing for 8 years straight. Yep. And so Wes, you reached the point probably year 2, but you probably started really like at year 7, just feeling this more of a desperation where we were talking about it. And it was hard because, Phyllis, I appreciated that you said the need for physical touch, because I think that's also where we miss, is we think it's a want. Well, they want me to do this. They want me to do that. But there's an actual biological need that we have to be touched. And so now we're in this long season, and then I remember us having one specific, and this conversation will haunt me, not because of anything you did, but just because of your desperation in that, sitting in the living room and me just being like, Bud, have hope. Like, it's going to get better. But at this point, we're on year 7 of him just essentially being completely neglected, physically, or not at all touching what his actual desires are. And you were just like, I don't have hope anymore. Like, this is my life. I just remember you were like, this is the life that I'm going to have. And so I do want to give to the moms that are listening that you've heard our 4-year-old today on this podcast who is homesick. And man, what a corner we have turned. What a corner we have turned to where it is, which I know we're talking about what happened with us Saturday night. I wasn't feeling well. That is a rare moment for us.
Oh, yeah.
And I just want you to have hope for what is to come. And in that season, be able to process your pain with your partner, and for you to understand that your partner's need is there. And that they are not just trying to demand one more thing from you.
Yeah, and I have to put in a plug for our late night masterclass, just because we emphasize sex dates so much. Phyllis and I have been having weekly sex dates for over a quarter of a century now. One of the few things we got right early on. And especially for moms with young kids, she needs that time. And that's kind of a big part of how they grew out. And we didn't have a plan on all this stuff. It just evolved organically. But Phyllis needed the time to transition from being a mom who's pulled on, sucked on, touched on all day long, and we have 4 children, to becoming a lover.
Yeah.
And as a male, I didn't experience that. I'm like, what? 15 seconds, I'm ready to rock and roll. And she's like, I still feel like a mom. I still feel like, these breasts are for nutrition for my babies. I'm like, oh, no, those are fun bags.
Yeah.
Oh, my God.
And so my experience is very different than hers. And we started developing that, and we built it was a small addition onto a very small house. But I put in a jacuzzi, and one night a week it was understood that after dinner, Mom's gone. She doesn't exist anymore. And our kids knew that even when they were little. They knew, we don't know exactly what that means, but we know it means something. And Mom's gone, and our saying is, unless there's a lot of blood, not just blood, but a lot of blood and fire, don't bother us on our sex date. So, but that's how that just kind of evolved. Again, initially we didn't have a organized plan on it, but it's just like, okay, this woman, I could tell that she needed a setting, a scenario where she could not be a mom, not be pulled on. And I'd put her in the jacuzzi tub. She would read a non-parenting magazine. This is back when we had wine coolers, which I tasted one of those recently. Those are really disgusting.
Yeah.
I'm shocked that anyway. And this was just a few weeks after God said you could have alcoholic beverages.
Right.
So it was a big shift in our life. But she would sit and she would have and I'd put, do everything. We'd clean up dinner. I'd put the kids to bed. And so she's got a good hour where she's just becoming a real person again. That sounds terrible. I don't mean that against our children, but it was just a shifting time. And she desperately needed that. And I didn't know that for so long because I'm like, what? And of course, as we kind of mentioned, I was like, oh, well, she just doesn't love me. She's not attracted to me. She doesn't want to be my wife anymore. No, she's touched out. She's been a mom 24/7. And yeah, she's not going to be able to quickly shift. There's no, knob on the back of her neck where I switch it over to lover mode. There's no such thing. And so it took us.
If only.
Right. But it's just no such thing. And so for me to make that space for her to be able to transition into lover mode.
Yeah.
It's totally true. Thank you. Yep. Yeah. Thank you, Wes, for coming on. I'm glad that we were able to have this conversation. I think that a lot of couples do experience this like friction,
What's a lot?
Most.
Every. I don't think it's a lot.
I have one friend couple who are incredible, and they actually I think are equal in their sex drives and physical touch needs and all, and they're the only ones that I know. And so it is possible, very rare.
Very rare. Yeah.
But yeah, Wes, will you close out the will with me?
Sure.
Yeah.
What a man. Wes, you amaze me.
Do you have it memorized yet?
Yes, I have, because it would take me a minute to pull it back up.
Yeah, no, you want to go first?
Sure. Feeling some anger that I have to leave right now and go pick up a kid.
Get that.
Immediately. And I won't be able to talk to you guys after this. Feeling some shame. There's a call that I have to make in the business that I really don't want to. But one of our employees said, no, you need to make this call. And so I felt shame that it wasn't immediately my idea. Feeling guilt for not giving my child more snacks so that he wouldn't come bother us during the podcast. Feeling lonely that I have to leave immediately after this and you're not coming with me. Feeling hurt. The first thing that came to my head was feeling hurt if we don't have sex tonight. This is, just transparent here.
Obviously.
I would say fear. I'm an entrepreneur, and fear is just always up and down with the business. You know what I mean? It's like just every single day. Feeling, where are we at?
Well, joy
Sad.
for one.
Sad
Yeah,
and
Jane.
joy.
Sad joy. Sad that you will be gone tonight. And joy of doing this with you guys. Thank you. Glenn had some words of affirmation, even though I'm not words of affirmation.
Yeah.
But they still feel good. Thank you, buddy.
Yeah. My anger is, I think it's secondary anger. It's more of anger on top of the shame of just that we have just been pacifying our kid for the last hour.
Yeah.
I have shame in doing that, who's sick, and anger that he's 4 and he kept interrupting us. Who does he think he is?
4-year-old.
I know.
Wow.
I know, he's so good. Guilt that I didn't tell you that this should be an issue-specific will about this conversation.
Oh, okay.
And so that's my fault, and I feel guilt about that. But I'm so glad that you shared with me what was actually happening with you in this moment.
Okay, yeah.
Sadness that, man, that you were hurt for a long time by me, and that you tried to tell me. Wow. And we didn't have the full language of how to do that, so you just tried with whatever words you knew how, and yeah, it created a lot of damage, but you tried, and I just was unable to be receptive at that time. I feel hurt that Saturday night, you just didn't see me.
Yeah.
In where I was at and my function level. And that caused us a very short moment of conflict.
Yeah.
Lonely that, you're going to be gone after this and we're not going to be together again today. I'm lonely in that. And I'm missing one. Fear. I have fear. I have fear that the sickness that Milo has is going to just spread all the way through our house, and we're going to have a kid home every day for the next week. And I have some exciting work to get done. And I have joy in where we are today. You know, like when I say to the couples that are in that baby making and birthing and raising early stage to have hope with these tools is everything.
Yeah.
And like we are just such a testimony of how this can change your life, knowing where we were, 4 years ago and where we are today and how we communicate. And that conflict Saturday lasted 20 minutes.
Yeah.
If
totally.
that. And really most of that was like doing the wheel and us talking through it in a healthy way.
Yeah, it wasn't the sex.
Compared to weeks and weeks at a time.
Yeah.
So thank you. If you were listening to this and you're just like, I relate to so much of that. Either my partner is needing something from me and I just don't have the capacity to give it to them. I don't know how. Or you're the partner that's desperate to be touched, desperate to be seen. And you're just like, how can I communicate this effectively? We have tools that help you do that. Yep. We have our Foundations Master course, and that is where you begin. And you can find that at connectioncodes.co /podcast. And that's where you can get all of our tools to dive in and really get started on this journey. Again, connectioncodes.co /podcast to find all of our tools. There's a 20% off coupon in there for any of our master classes. And we would just love for you to join us on this journey. It is truly life-changing, to put it easily. And we're so glad you're here. If you would share this episode's going out on Valentine's Day, which is my favorite holiday. So I'm just going to spend a moment to tell you that, like, we love you. Thank you so much for showing up every week and listening. And send this podcast to 3 of your couple friends that you love. And you're like, hey, man, anybody else struggling with this? Is it just me? And how can we partner together in our community to just have stronger and healthier relationships and marriages? And so, we're glad that you're here because...
well, I do have to say real quickly, this is spreading around the world because of you. And as Tira said, share this with somebody. At least one somebody. You probably know 10 somebodies that could really use this. So we encourage you to do this because you need this.
You deserve this.
So let's do this.
Let's do this.
Let's do this.